much for that detailed there, just in terms of where the hurricane will go next. And Michael, you know, as Karen was outlining, it's so unpredictable, Irma, and the best we can do is really seek higher ground and really seek the advice of authorities and stay safe.
Yeah, water is always the issue in a situation like this, isn't it? Isa, thanks so much. We'll check in with you. Let's go to Miguel Marquez now. He's in Punta Gorda on Florida's west coast. Conditions have been getting steadily worse there. The west coast is going to take the brunt of this, although most of the state, nobody's going to be unaffected. Bring us up to date, Miguel.
Yeah. Punta Gorda very aware of hurricanes. 13 years ago, Hurricane Charlie ripped through here and nearly leveled the town. We're just north of Fort Myers, just south of Sarasota on the west coast of Florida here. That hurricane track takes it just west of the city, which is good because it's not coming ashore here, it seems, at least at the moment. It's bad in the sense that it's on that right-hand side of the eye wall, which is some of the worst sort of wind and storm surge. They're expecting a very big storm surge in here, basically a giant wave out of the ocean that comes onto land and then sweeps everything back out in relatively quick order. It's a very low-lying county here in Charlotte County. They have 3 shelters here only because the lands are so low they don't really have anything higher than below sea level, essentially. So the shelters in the county are completely full. They will accept people if there is a dire situation, but they are moving people to 5 shelters, or 4 now because one is closed there, 4 shelters in Sarasota County just north of here to get people taken care of if they need help. There is no gas to be had in Charlotte County. We looked quite a bit today. The apps that we use on the phones as well, just nothing. People basically hunkering down now. The beginning of the wind that we are starting to see now, just the move toward that hurricane force wind that we will see in the next 24 hours has begun. It is light now compared to what we're going to see in just a few hours. Michael?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm curious, you mentioned the shelters being full there. There are other shelters a bit further out. Are people able to get to those shelters if they decide, hey, I made a mistake, I want to get out of here?
Yes. I mean, the roads are open. It's pretty much a ghost town out there. You see a lot of emergency vehicles out and police and ambulances, but other than that, you don't see much else. You can get up there. The rain is not heavy here yet. The surge has not begun, so there is time to get to shelters, but they have to move now because as the hours tick on, there's going to be less and less opportunity to do that.
Yeah, there is that point where you just can't go or shouldn't go. Miguel Marquez, that's a real worry, isn't it? Ed Rappaport, thanks so much. Appreciate having you on and your expertise. Thanks.
Thank you.
Key West. This is one of few that we've had today. There will be many. In fact, it's not unusual to have 50, 60, 70, 75, 80 tornado warnings. I know Harvey had over 200. But again, tornadoes are going to be an issue. And I know for many, when they're looking at, of course, Irma making its way toward southwestern Florida, Miami, Hollywood, Boca, Delray Beach may think, okay, we're not going to see the strongest winds, but you're in an area where you could have a higher concentration of tornadoes. Now, again, as we continue to watch this, Sanderson, make its way off the coast, I'm going to show you a radar in a minute. Very interesting now to continue to watch the eye. We're already seeing on the infrared satellite imagery more purple. That's the higher cloud tops, colder cloud tops, so it's starting to generate some energy. But I think we may be going through one of those eye wall replacement cycles. More than when almost the entire state of Florida under a hurricane warning. Watches to the north will change in due time as the storm progresses northward. We've talked tirelessly about the storm surge, of course, getting quite great. Now, you have to understand where you see the area purple of 10 to 15 feet. Initially, that's wetlands. That's Everglades. There's barely any roads there until you get up to around Alligator Alley. But it does extend all the way through the Carolinas, and that will continue to be the case. Now, here's the eye. We've got a secondary banding in yellow that is starting to occur. We typically see that when that outer band starts to form, and then it shrinks in toward the center, and it gains strength. It's a little close to the shoreline right now, but I think that's going to happen. Now, consider this. We've talked tirelessly about as well. We've got 90 miles here from Cuba to the coast of Florida to develop. This is going to be more than 90 miles. You have to consider the curvature and its western track and then to the north. So instead of 90 miles of extremely warm water, we've got 120, 125 miles. So that will intensify over time with this water temperatures being at 85 or 90. Tornado watch now for the extreme southern half of Florida. We're going to talk more in depth about that as time progresses and what to expect past Florida. There are millions of people up in Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, and Tennessee that have got an interesting forecast, too, and we'll share that with them, Anderson, in just a little bit. Tom. Yeah, John, we continue to watch the storm center now, making its way away.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Michael Holmes, coming to you live from Orlando, Florida.
And I'm Isa Suarez, coming to you live from Miami. You are watching CNN's continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma.
And U.S. officials are warning about how dangerous this storm will be when it hits Florida full on in the next few hours. In Key West, intense winds from Hurricane Irma already shaking palm trees. More than 6.5 million people have now been ordered to evacuate the southern parts of the state of Florida. Authorities are also expecting even more power outages lasting perhaps days and even weeks. So far, close to 200,000 customers have lost electricity. That number could swell into millions of people when the storm really makes impact. Isa Suarez in Miami. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. You're talking about losing power, and we've got a resident in Key West, Randy Tao joins me now on the line. And Randy, just want to double check with you, as Michael was saying, many residents without power. Do you still have power at this moment?
We do right now, and the really heavy winds have started. So we've got power, and we can hear the rumbling outside. We're shuttered in pretty good where we can't see what's going on, but we can hear it outside.
And as you said, you're shuttered in, and you're one of the people, those people that we've been speaking to have decided to ride out the storm. Why have you decided to do that, Randy? Well,
as we watched the storm, it drifted more to the west, away from us, where we were not going to be in the center of that core going through the upper Keys. It's actually moved to the west toward Key West, which is about 80 miles from where I'm at. And our winds are going to be a lot less than what they're going to have. And we're on high ground. We've got a solid house to withstand what's coming. And hopefully there won't be much of a tide surge in this area. And we felt it was a safe place to ride it out and be at home.
But we've been hearing from our meteorologist, Karen McGinnis, who've been saying, you know, the storm surge is something we keep talking about. That can go up between 10 to 15 feet. I know you said you're slightly on higher ground, but those 10, 15 feet, is that a concern to you?
Well, it certainly can be, you know, and that's kind of a prediction that they're given where we are in this subdivision, Indian Mound in Tavernier. We're on pretty high ground, so even if it does flood and we get a tide surge of that magnitude, I don't think it's high enough to get into our house. So, and plus we have a second story as well, so we're not too worried about the flood water.
Randy, at what point did you decide to stay put and just hunker down?
Well, when we tried to find accommodations for our family of 8 and 5 dogs, we just weren't coming up with much. And plus we were watching on TV with the lines and the traffic and the chaos that was going on throughout South Florida of everybody evacuating. You know, everybody took it very serious, which is a good thing. But sometimes you leave your safe haven to go somewhere you think will be okay, and you ride the storm out there, or you end up in ground zero, and then you can't get back to your home in the Keys.
And as you look outside a window, I know you said you're prepared, you're on higher ground, but as you look outside your window, give us a sense, give our viewers a sense of what you see and what you hear.
Well, you can't really see anything. It's dark and we're boarded up, but you can hear the rumbling. You can hear trees breaking. You can hear things hitting the side of the house where the shutters are. So it's really more of a wind and noise that you're hearing right now. And prior to this, there was a lot of trees down already. So that's really about all you can get from what's going on. You know it's windy. You don't know how windy, if it's 70, 80 miles an hour. But the forecast for us was to a 20% chance of hurricane force winds was going to happen in my area.
Randy Towell, do keep safe and keep us posted on how you're doing, how your family, your dogs are doing, and we'll touch base with you in the next several hours or so. We'll wish you all the best. Of course, we have seen, as Randy was saying, the wind starting to pick up. The rain has started too, but also what we're seeing is, that howling. The wind is just ferocious at this moment. That's the noise that I keep hearing. We'll have much more of our continuing coverage after a very short break.
From the coast of Cuba, we knew it would make its way here, and all week long, since actually last weekend, we were saying until the storm reaches Cuba and turns northward, we just do not know for sure where landfall will be. The computer models, we pushed into them and rely on them, and they have been fluctuating earlier this week to the east and now more of a push to the west. And we're going to continue to watch that because the steering currents mean everything, but this is such a monster storm, it really doesn't mean anybody's going to miss out on this. So we are watching the development. The pressure is dropping. Most likely we're going to see an increase in the winds because it takes a while for the winds to catch up to that pressure drop. In fact, 125 miles per hour, I wouldn't be surprised to see it up to 130. That'll kick it back up to Category 4 status, and we could even see it grow a little bit more. We've got a lot of land, our water to work with. It's not just 90 miles. If you talk about the curvature over toward Fort Myers, that's about 125 miles. So it's got time, it's got fuel, and it still has its spin and intensity. We had a few models that wanted to drape it down into the higher terrain of Cuba. That would have tore the system down a little bit. But really, for the models to be even in central Cuba or staying off, it's been running pretty much mediocre right through these models. We have a tornado watch now for the entire southern half of Florida. That will continue to move northward in time as the storm approaches. We've had a few warnings. We've got a warning right now in Key West for a tornado. So that means it's either Doppler indicated or visually indicated. So again, on the ground, as the bands continue to move in, the wind gusts will increase. There will be times of a complete downpour activity and then a couple of quiet times. But we are going to see a gentle increase in the winds. The forecast, which shows the spin and the rainfall, bright red are your heavy downpours. And again, our storm surge is going to be significant, mainly first in the Everglades. Of course, Miami, we're watching them closely, but the real significant increase of the storm surge in the Everglades. And that's good news. It's wetlands. They can have that. But as it continues to march northward, we'll see more of a tornado outbreak possibility on the East Coast. We'll have the surge, of course, continuing up the East Coast. On the West Coast, winds will be out of the north somewhat, northeasterly. They will wrap around. I think Tampa is going to have a problem. Not so much, of course, well, yes, when the storm moves through. But don't let your guard down in Tampa Bay because most likely on the back edge of this, we're going to find winds coming in from the northwest and due west. So that'll shove the, of course, storm surge and those walls of water back into Tampa Bay, which could be just as bad, if not worse. I want to go a little bit further out, though, and talk about those in Georgia, South Carolina, into Alabama and Tennessee. As you see, the track has been curving, and we've been watching this. Let me show you what some of the models look like, of course, after we talk about the winds, because I want everybody to know, if you haven't been in the southeast, you see the core of the winds move up through Florida, hugging that west coast, moving northward. What you see in purple here are wind gusts in excess of 60, maybe even 70 miles per hour. This area of the southeastern U.S. is pine country, which means hardy pines. Weak root systems, but very high. I mean, they're massive. They fall in isolated thunderstorms, knock out power, damage trees. We could easily see tens and tens of thousands of trees destroyed through Florida and through the southeast. But now, John, watch what happens to these models. They move up With the force of wind, we carry it into into northern Alabama. I'll show it to you later. It starts to become a bird's nest like we had with Harvey, which means there may be a loss of steering currents when it gets from central Tennessee to northern Alabama, and that means heavy, heavy rainfall.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Michael Holmes, coming to you live in Orlando, Florida. This is CNN's coverage of Hurricane Irma. Well, the city of Tampa on Florida's west coast facing potential storm surge from Irma. Now, I spoke earlier with the city's mayor, Bob Buckhorn, about what it's doing to prepare.
Well, we train for this all year round. We recognize that living in Florida, that this is always a risk. You know, we've been lucky because we haven't taken a direct hit in over 90 years. So we really have been blessed. But we also recognize that our day was going to come, and it looks like our day has come. Fortunately, we've got a whole city that has trained for this. Now we're in the execution phase, and we got a lot of people that are counting on us to get up and do our jobs tomorrow.
You know, there's been a lot of sort of talk, speculation, but also reporting that Tampa in particular is vulnerable to this sort of storm, to a hurricane, and to the storm surge. So many houses close to water, of course, and the proximity to the lower levels. What about the storm surge? That must be your big concern, I imagine.
It is indeed. It is the issue that we worry about the most. It is what we fear the most. I mean, we're going to get through the winds. We'll get through the rain, depending on what this level of surge is. But more importantly, the surge will occur tomorrow at the same time we have a high tide. So that compounds the problem. So for our low-lying areas, which happen to be very close to downtown, those areas that tend to hold a lot of water in rainstorms anyway because they are low-lying, my house, for example, we've evacuated. I am in flood zone level A. Those are the areas that I fear for the most and potentially would experience that surge moving in early on Monday morning.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, everybody hopes that, Irma is a little bit kinder to Tampa than other places because of that vulnerability. Tell us, what is the worst case scenario? What if the storm does the worst thing and you do get that surge? How big will it be? How much of the city could be impacted?
Well, certainly all of downtown would be impacted. All of the areas along the waterfront, which tend to be our more affluent areas, would be impacted. It would be pretty devastating. There would be a lot of trees down. There would be a lot of standing water. There would be power disruptions. It would take a number of days to get the power hooked up, if not weeks. So I think you would see Tampa in a predicament, not that we wouldn't emerge from it, but it would be a tough couple weeks, I think.
Tell us about shelters, preparations. Are the shelters full? Are there enough shelters? Have people been going there?
Well, they have been going there for sure. And obviously with a storm of this magnitude, there are never enough shelters. This storm, as you know, took a jog to the west only 2 or 3 days ago. We had anticipated going to help our friends in Miami, not being the recipient of these hurricane force winds. So there were a lot of people, I would suspect, that didn't think this storm was going to hit them, that thought Tampa was safe, that this was going to be a challenge for the East Coast. And so their preparations were probably delayed. The shelters are filling up. They're filling up quickly. There is still some availability. I would imagine some point tomorrow that will end as well. But here's what people need to know. You don't have to travel necessarily to a shelter. You don't have to travel to Georgia. All you have to do is get out of flood zone A. Just that B, C, D, and E, it could be a few blocks away. It could be a few miles away. All you need to do is get to higher ground, get to a safe place, stay with a friend. It's not necessary that you completely pack up and move somewhere else.
And that is all the time we have this hour. Thanks for being with us. I'm Michael Holmes, live in Orlando, Florida.
We'll break that down for you more.
From Miami, our coverage of Hurricane Irma continues after a very short break. Do be safe, and stay right here with CNN.
The coming hours, but again, it's just beginning. We've got a multi-day event heading our direction. John.
Tom Sater, listening to every word of your forecast. 20 million people in Florida alone. And then you start to talk about Alabama and Georgia. Millions more will be affected by this storm as these days continue. Millions already affected. So many hurt. So much damage through the Caribbean. That is why we're watching this storm so closely. Tom.
Yeah, John.
So many things to tell you. First of all, its position now puts it about 80 miles to the south-southeast of Key West. It has slowed down. We watched it march across the Atlantic, and it was moving towards the west at just about 18 miles an hour. That was probably at its peak. Then we noticed as it approached the Leeward Islands and then into the Turks and Caicos, it started slowing down a little bit more. Yesterday, we were looking at it at just about 12 miles an hour. Now look at what it is. Our latest update from the Hurricane Center has it moving to the northwest at 6 miles an hour. The slower it moves, the better chance we're going to see this increase in intensity, because the water temperature here is from about 85 to close to 90 degrees. Perfect combination. There's nothing that